The used car lot sat at the edge of town, half forgotten and shrouded in an aura of neglect. Rusting skeletons of old sedans and trucks leaned against one another like they were holding secrets too heavy to bear. I hadn't planned on stopping there that day, but my old Civic had finally given up. And desperation can make even the sketchiest places seem like salvation. Looking for something reliable, eh? The salesman's voice startled me. He was a wiry man with a crooked grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. His name tag read Mike, but the name didn't match the unsettling energy he gave off. I need something cheap, I said, scanning the lot. Cheap and reliable? He chuckled dryly. A unicorn, my friend, but I think I've got something close. He led me past rows of dented SUVs and scratched sedans until we stopped in front of a car that seemed out of place. It was a sleek black vintage Plymouth Fury, gleaming like it had been pulled straight from a classic car show. It didn't fit the rest of the inventory, and for some reason, I couldn't take my eyes off it. She's a beauty, huh? Mike said, his grin widening. Mint condition, runs like a dream. And for you, a steal at just $3,000. I hesitated. It looked too good to be true. And I've always believed in the old adage about deals that seem too perfect. But as I ran my fingers along the smooth surface of the car, I felt an odd warmth, like the car was alive. My common sense screamed at me to walk away, but something deeper, something primal, drew me in. Does it have a history? I asked. Mike's grin faltered for just a second, so brief I almost missed it. Every car's got a history, he said, shrugging. This one's just memorable. Against my better judgment, I bought it. The drive home was smooth, eerily smooth. The engine purred like a predator, and the steering wheel felt warm under my hands, like it had been waiting for me. That night, I couldn't stop staring at it through the window. It sat in my driveway, bathed in moonlight, looking far too pristine for its age. Something about it unsettled me, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Around midnight, I heard it. A faint creak, like the sound of weight shifting on leather seats. My heart thudded as I peeked through the blinds. The car was exactly where I'd left it, but the driver's side door was slightly ajar, swaying gently in the breeze. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But as I approached, I noticed something that froze me in my tracks. The faint outline of a handprint on the inside of the driver's window. It wasn't mine. The air around the car felt colder than the rest of the night, and the closer I got, the more a strange sensation crept over me, like I was being watched. When I finally reached the door, I hesitated. Something told me not to look inside, but curiosity is a cruel master. I swung the door open and shined the flashlight onto the seat. The interior was spotless, but the smell, an overwhelming stench of damp earth and decay, made me gag. And then I saw it. A faint, dark stain on the leather, like someone had been sitting there for far too long. The sound of the car door slamming shut nearly made me drop the flashlight. I spun around, but there was no one there. My driveway was empty, my street silent. I should have walked back inside, locked the doors, and called it a night. But something kept me there, standing in the cold. Because faintly, just for a moment, I thought I heard breathing. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had all been a bad dream. Maybe I'd been too tired, too stressed, and my mind had played tricks on me. But as the daylight poured over my driveway, I couldn't ignore the smell. That same foul stench of damp earth and rot seeped from the car's interior, faint but unmistakable. I tried everything: air fresheners, scrubbing the seats, even leaving the windows open to let the breeze clear it out. Nothing worked. The smell clung to the car like a curse. Driving it was worse. The first time I got behind the wheel after that night, the air in the car felt heavy, oppressive, as though I wasn't alone. My rearview mirror played tricks on me, catching fleeting glimpses of something or someone in the back seat. Every time I turned around, there was nothing there. But the worst came 3 nights later. I was driving home from work on a deserted stretch of road, the kind where the trees crowd in from both sides and the only light comes from your own headlights. The radio sputtered with static, then went completely silent. I fiddled with the dial, but no station came through. That's when I heard it. A soft, low whisper. "Turn here." The voice wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from inside the car. I froze, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice shaking. No answer. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw nothing but darkness. Still, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and the air felt colder, as if someone or something was sitting right behind me. The whisper came again, clearer this time. "Turn here." Without thinking, I obeyed, veering off the main road onto a narrow, unmarked path. My headlights barely illuminated the overgrown trail ahead, but the voice continued to guide me, soft and insistent. "Go farther." "Why?" I whispered, my throat dry. No response. Just silence, except for the low hum of the engine and the crunch of gravel beneath the tires. I drove until the path opened into a clearing. The headlights revealed an abandoned farmhouse, its windows shattered and walls covered in peeling paint. The car shuddered to a stop, and the engine died on its own. I sat there, paralyzed, until the smell hit me again. Stronger this time, like the car itself was exhaling decay. Slowly, I turned the key in the ignition, but the engine refused to start. That's when I felt it. A hand, ice cold, brushing against the back of my neck. I screamed, spinning around, but the back seat was empty. The doors were locked, the windows rolled up, yet the smell grew stronger, filling the car until I thought I might choke. And then I saw it. A figure in the rearview mirror. A woman, pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. I bolted from the car, stumbling into the clearing. My phone had no signal, and the farmhouse loomed like a shadowed sentinel, watching my every move. The car's headlights flickered, then went out completely, plunging the area into darkness. The last thing I heard before I ran was the car door creaking open, followed by the faint sound of footsteps behind me. I didn't stop running until I reached the main road, my lungs burning and my heart pounding like a war drum. When I finally dared to look back, the car was nowhere in sight. It hadn't followed me, at least not physically. I flagged down a passing truck and convinced the driver, a grizzled old man named Carl, to give me a ride home. His expression darkened when I told him about the car. "You mean that Plymouth Fury?" he asked, gripping the wheel tighter. "Damn thing's been trouble for years. I've heard stories. Folks say it's cursed." My stomach turned. "What kind of stories?" Carl glanced at me, his face grim. "That car's been sold and resold more times than I can count. Every owner ends up dead or worse. It's got a history. Accidents, disappearances, suicides. Whatever it is, you need to get rid of it. And fast." I nodded, though deep down, I knew it wouldn't be that easy. When I got home, I found the car parked in my driveway, its black surface gleaming under the porch light. My keys were still in my pocket, yet somehow it had returned. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, the night air suddenly feeling thick and suffocating. The car seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, as if it were alive and waiting for me. The faint sound of breathing reached my ears again, this time unmistakable. I backed away slowly, intending to call the police, but when I reached for my phone, I found it dead. No signal, no battery, nothing. That's when the headlights blinked on, blinding me momentarily. The engine roared to life, though no one sat behind the wheel. "Get in," a voice whispered from nowhere. I stumbled back, shaking my head. "No, leave me alone." The car revved, its tires screeching against the pavement as it inched forward, herding me like prey. Desperation clawed at my chest as I realized I had no choice. If I didn't get in, the car would run me down. As soon as I slid into the driver's seat, the door slammed shut behind me, trapping me inside. The stench of rot was overwhelming, and the air felt colder than a winter night. The dashboard lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the interior. "Drive," the voice commanded, low and guttural. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel. The car seemed to move on its own, guiding me down the empty streets. My neighborhood blurred past, replaced by dark woods and twisting roads I didn't recognize. "Where are we going?" I whispered, but the voice didn't answer. Instead, the radio crackled to life, playing a distorted tune that sounded like a warped lullaby. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her again, the gaunt woman with hollow eyes, sitting in the passenger seat, her head turned slowly toward me, and her cracked lips parted. "You shouldn't have taken it," she rasped. Taken what?" I stammered, tears streaming down my face. "The car," she said, her voice echoing as if it came from everywhere and nowhere. "It's bound to me, and now to you." Her hand reached out, skeletal and cold, gripping my wrist. Images flooded my mind, violent crashes, blood-soaked roads, and terrified screams. I saw her life, her death, and the moment her spirit became trapped in the car. "I didn't know," I pleaded. "I'll get rid of it, I swear." "It won't let you," she said, her face twisting into something monstrous. "You belong to it now." The car screeched to a halt, throwing me forward. When I looked up, I was back in the clearing by the abandoned farmhouse. The engine cut off, and the woman vanished. The silence was deafening, but I could feel it. The car watching me, waiting for me to make my next move. The clearing was deathly silent, except for the faint creak of the car cooling down. My legs felt like lead as I stepped out into the darkness, the chill of the night biting through my clothes. The farmhouse loomed ahead, its broken windows like vacant eyes staring into my soul. I wanted to run, but the car wouldn't let me. Its headlights flickered back on, bathing the clearing in an unnatural, sickly glow. The air around it seemed to hum with energy, and I knew I was trapped. "Why me?" I whispered, tears streaming down my face. The voice came again, low and guttural, echoing in my ears. "It chooses who it needs." A sick realization washed over me. This wasn't just a curse. The car was a predator, feeding on fear, desperation, and pain. It didn't just take lives. It consumed them, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. The farmhouse door creaked open, and a figure stepped out, a tall, shadowy man with a wide-brimmed hat. His face was obscured, but his presence radiated malice. "You've brought it back," he said, his voice like gravel. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "I was its first," he replied, "and now I keep it fed." I staggered back, my mind racing. The woman's words echoed in my head. "It's bound to me. And now, to you. The car wasn't just cursed, it was a trap, and I'd walk straight into it." "I'm not staying," I shouted, turning to run. The man laughed, a hollow, bone-chilling sound. "You think you can leave? No one escapes." Behind me, the car roared to life, its engine growling like a beast. The headlights flared brighter, casting long, jagged shadows across the clearing. The ground beneath me trembled as the car began to move, its tires crunching over the gravel with deliberate menace. I sprinted toward the farmhouse, my heart pounding in my ears. The door slammed shut behind me as I stumbled inside, gasping for breath. The interior was worse than I imagined. Rotting floorboards, mold-covered walls, and an overwhelming sense of decay. But the car didn't stop. I heard it outside, circling the house like a predator stalking its prey. The windows rattled, and the walls seemed to vibrate with the force of its growls. And then, silence. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to hear. Was it gone? Suddenly, the front door burst open, splintering under the force of an invisible blow. The car's headlights flooded the room, and the figure from the clearing stepped inside, his shadow stretching impossibly long. "You belong to it now," he said, his voice echoing with finality. The floor beneath me gave way, and I fell into darkness. When I woke, I was back in the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel. My knuckles were white, my breaths shallow and panicked. The road stretched endlessly before me, twisting into the horizon like a serpent. I tried to stop, to pull over, but the car wouldn't let me. It drove itself, the engine purring with satisfaction. The radio crackled, and the woman's voice came through, soft and mournful. "It doesn't end," she whispered. I glanced at the rearview mirror and saw her sitting there, her hollow eyes filled with sorrow. "It keeps going, forever." The truth hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't just cursed. I was trapped, condemned to drive this car for eternity, carrying its darkness to the next unsuspecting soul. The headlights burned brighter, piercing through the night. The road stretched on, endless and unyielding, as the car devoured the last remnants of my will. Somewhere, in the back of my mind, I could hear the man's laughter mingling with the woman's sorrowful whispers. And in the depths of the car, I felt its hunger growing, waiting for the next victim. I was no longer myself. I was a part of the car now, a passenger in my own nightmare.